Hello, my name is Ren. At my sister's wedding, she pointed at me in front of 300 people and shouted, "Call security! Get this pauper away!" And my mother? She turned her head like I was no one at all. 10 minutes later, that same sister was on the ballroom floor, sobbing, begging me. But this didn't start on the dance floor. It started years ago, in 100 quiet moments, when I was always invited last, always seated farthest, always told to not make a scene. I used to think staying quiet kept the peace. Now I wonder, how many times can you be erased before you stop trying to belong? I stepped through the glass doors of the hotel with the kind of smile you wear when you're bracing for a slap. The Kimpton Sawyer was dressed to impress that night. Candles in gold holders, floral arches that reeked of money, and servers in black uniforms darting around like stagehands. Sacramento heat clung to the hem of my dress, a modest navy piece I'd bought secondhand. Nothing flashy, nothing torn, just quiet, like I tried to be. No one noticed me arrive, no one ever did. I wasn't expecting a warm welcome, let's be clear, but I did expect to be treated like family. That's what Verena, my mother, always preached. Family first. But if family only counts when it's convenient or camera-ready, what does it actually mean? I followed the sound of laughter down the corridor, took a slow breath, and entered the reception hall. The moment I stepped in, I knew something was off. The temperature didn't drop, not literally, but the energy did. Guests didn't turn their heads. They didn't have to. Their silence was enough. Then I saw her. Isolde stood at the center like some twisted goddess of approval, veil pinned just right, champagne in one hand, other gesturing animatedly as people fawned. The whole room bent toward her, like she was gravity. She caught sight of me. Her smile froze. 1 second. 2. Then she turned full on and shouted, "Call security! Get this pauper away!" The word cracked the air. Pauper. A fork clinked to the floor. 300 guests. People who knew me, who knew our family, turned their eyes on me like I was a problem that wandered in off the street. The DJ stopped mid-track. The florist who did our neighbor's Christmas display stopped tying a bow. And I just stood there. She didn't even blink. "Did you hear me?" Isolde's voice climbed higher. "She's not on the list. She's not even supposed to be here." I wanted to believe it was a joke, that she'd follow it with a laugh, something like, "Gotcha," or "Lighten up." But the way her eyes locked on mine, that wasn't a joke. That was surgical. And the silence that followed, that was complicity. Then, across the room, I saw my mother, Verena, the woman who held my hair back when I threw up as a kid, who told me to always be gracious, even when others weren't. Who said, "Your sister just needs more attention than you." She looked right at me, and she turned away. Not even a blink of hesitation, not even a whisper of, "Enough, Isolde." I stared at the side of her face, the curve of her cheek as she leaned toward one of my cousins, whispering something, probably about the flowers or the caterer or how warm it was inside. Anything but me. It didn't burn. It froze. Deep. People shifted uncomfortably, not to help. No, just to avoid being in the blast radius. I was radioactive, untouchable. Not one person moved. That's when the security guard approached. He looked unsure, glancing at Isolde, then at me. I caught the way his jaw clenched. He didn't want to do this. "I'm gonna need you to step outside, ma'am." Ma'am. I almost laughed. Instead, I looked at him, then back at my sister, whose smug smirk said, "Got her." I nodded. No drama, no tears, no parting shot. I took one slow step backward, then another. And just as I reached the edge of the room, just as I was about to disappear from this ridiculous little performance, Isolde called after me with a laugh that could slice skin. "Don't forget your pride on the way out." That was the moment. Not her scream, not even Verena's silence. That laugh, it was the sound of someone who thought they'd won. I walked out of the ballroom, my heels tapping steady on the marble. No rush, no stumble. Outside, the evening air hit me like a wave. Cool, still, real. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there, staring at the darkening sky above Sacramento, thinking, this isn't where it started, and it sure as hell isn't where it ends. But humiliation doesn't begin when they scream at you. It starts much earlier. I didn't walk out of the hotel, I just drifted sideways. I found a hallway tucked behind the main ballroom. It was narrow, dimly lit, probably meant for staff or last-minute floral touch-ups. My heels clicked softer here. The music was muted, and just like that, I was gone, out of sight, if not yet out of mind. A part of me wanted to leave, to call a cab, go home, and forget this night ever happened. But another part, quieter, more stubborn, needed to stay. Not to make a scene, not to prove anything. Just to see how far they'd take it. I stood there for a minute, breathing through the sting in my chest, then smoothed my dress and walked back in through the side entrance like I was meant to be there all along. No one noticed. Again, the room had shifted. The guests were seated now, plates and glasses clinking under the low hum of conversation. Candles flickered on mirrored tables, reflecting 100 curated smiles. I searched for my name among the calligraphy place cards, table by table, row by row. Nothing. Not even a scribble, not even a blank spot. Eventually, an usher approached me, young, eager to help, probably paid by the hour. "Are you looking for your seat, ma'am?" "Ma'am." Again, I nodded. He glanced at a tablet, tapped a few times, then said, "We've got you at auxiliary table 6, just along the far wall." Auxiliary. He led me to a folding chair, literally folding, beside a steel exit door, propped open with a crate of empty wine bottles. The table had one flower arrangement, half wilted. 3 others were already seated there: the valet manager, a cake delivery driver still in uniform, and a makeup artist scrolling her phone. No name tag, no formal setting, no welcome. I sat. For a while, I just listened. Waiters passed by with trays of champagne I wasn't offered. Applause rose every few minutes as someone clinked a glass or made a toast. Isolde's new husband raised his flute like he was proposing to the crowd all over again. People laughed, cheered, dabbed eyes with cloth napkins. I kept my hands in my lap. My water glass was warm. From this distance, the head table looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Tall candles, perfect symmetry, smiles choreographed like dance steps. I watched my mother raise her glass and beam toward Isolde, the kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years, if ever. And I sat there, invisible, next to a guy asking if the catering staff had vegan options for the folks in the back. I wasn't a guest. I was a leftover. The photographer's voice broke through the background. "Blanchard family, let's gather for a group photo up front, please." My breath caught. Maybe this was the moment. I stood, smoothed my dress again, and walked toward the cluster forming near the dance floor. A few people moved aside. Someone gestured toward the lights. I took one step closer, then another. "Excuse me," a voice said behind me. I turned. It was the event coordinator. Tight bun, headset, clipboard, clutched like a weapon of bureaucracy. "Sorry," she said gently, but firmly. "We're doing the immediate set only. Bride's request." I blinked. "I'm her sister." I understand, she said. But this group was pre-selected for layout and time. She smiled like she'd offered me tea instead of rejection. I stepped back, again, like I had in the ballroom. Flashes burst. People posed. Someone laughed too loud. I wasn't even asked to take the photo. I was asked not to. The irony? Half those people in the picture hadn't seen Isolde in years. Some were barely family at all, but they looked good in a frame. I slipped back toward the hallway. My dress caught on the edge of a chair. I didn't stop to fix it. Outside, the air had cooled. Traffic hummed on J Street. The streetlights flickered against the glass facade of the hotel. I leaned against the stone wall and closed my eyes. What else haven't I been invited into? I whispered, not expecting an answer, because deep down, I already knew. The truth is, it didn't start tonight. I should have known the moment she sent that text. 5 days earlier, I'd stopped by Mom's house in Carmichael. It was a quick visit, supposedly to help her double-check RSVPs for the wedding. She claimed the planner was overwhelmed and that Isolde had so many little details on her plate. The usual excuses that made grown women sound like high-strung teenagers. I knew what this was. I was being pulled in because I'm the one who shows up. Always. No need for reminders. No need for a printed invitation, apparently. When I asked about it, lightly, just to see her reaction, Mom blinked slowly like she was confused why I'd even bring it up. Well, you know how busy things get, she said, stirring her tea. Of course you're welcome, Ren. You don't need something fancy. Just be there, for your sister. I should have caught it then, the way she said for your sister, like it was an obligation, a duty to be performed without complaint. Like I was a supporting character in someone else's story. After a half hour of sifting through spreadsheets and half-typed emails, she passed me her tablet to check a list. The interface was clunky, the wedding planning app loaded slow, and I tapped around trying to find the guest dashboard. What opened instead was a group chat thread, Isolde and 2 of her friends. I didn't mean to snoop, but when your name appears in the preview of a message, you don't scroll past it. Human instinct doesn't work that way. The message was barely a day old. God, I hope she doesn't show up in one of those thrift store cardigans. I only invited her for Mom's sake. Let's just pray she doesn't talk too much. There was a string of laughing emojis below it. Another friend chimed in. At least it'll make for good contrast photos. They were talking about me, not as a sister, as a liability, a punchline. I froze, staring at the glowing screen. Mom walked into the room at that moment and asked something about the florist. I mumbled that I needed a second and stepped into the hallway, tablet still in hand. I didn't scroll further, didn't need to. I'd read enough. Outside, the heat of late spring made the air feel heavier. I leaned against the wall and pressed the screen lock, darkening the thread. My reflection looked back at me, not surprised, not really. Back inside, I placed the tablet quietly on the coffee table and excused myself. Said something about work emails piling up. Verena nodded without looking up from her folded linens. That night, I couldn't sleep. The message played on a loop in my head, louder than it had any right to be. Over and over, the same words, thrift store cardigans, invited her for Mom's sake. Let's pray she doesn't talk too much. It wasn't new. Isolde had always drawn lines in the sand between us. Her big sister moments, never really about love, but about reminding me of my place. When we were kids, she used to hide my shoes before school. Said it was just teasing. In high school, she'd tell people I was adopted. It's funny, she'd insist. You're the only one who actually fell for it. And I did. But this wasn't schoolyard drama. This wasn't harmless sibling rivalry. This was a grown woman publicly mocking her own sister to a room full of people who thought it was funny. And Mom, well, if she wasn't condoning it, she was definitely ignoring it. Around 2 in the morning, I got out of bed. My apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the occasional car passing outside. I opened my journal, the one I hadn't touched in months. I didn't write a full page, just one line. If she erases me on purpose, I will not play nice. I didn't even sign my name. Then I closed the book, placed it face down on my nightstand, and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't angry yet. Anger comes fast and hot. This was something slower, heavier. It sank into the ribs, settled beneath the skin. Something permanent. By morning, I'd reread the message 10 more times. But I said nothing. Not to Isolde, not to Mom, not to anyone. Because that's what peacekeepers do. They keep the silence, even when it burns. They thought I was decoration, but I still held the switch. I slipped my phone back into my clutch and returned to the ballroom with a pace slow enough to mask the storm gathering under my skin. The crowd had shifted into the rhythm of dinner now, servers gliding across the floor, clattering plates, conversations weaving in and out of scripted laughter. I moved toward my table, my folding chair by the emergency exit, more out of habit than comfort. The rest of the overflow guests were already mid-meal. The florist chatted with the DJ. Someone from valet scrolled through sports scores on their phone. I sat and waited for a plate that never came. Minutes passed. Then a young server paused at our table, hesitant. She looked at her checklist, frowned slightly, and leaned toward me with a voice so hushed it made the disrespect louder. "I'm sorry. We ran short. Kitchen's working on it, but it might take a bit." Her smile was apologetic, like someone who wasn't at fault but still bore the burden of telling you didn't matter. "It's fine," I said automatically, because that's what women like me are raised to say. It wasn't fine. I counted 9 plates being set down at the head table, each one a precise sculpture of roasted meat, stacked greens, and something that shimmered under soft lighting. I counted none at our table. Verena sat beside Isolde, laughing at something the groom's uncle said. The family table looked like it had been curated for a magazine spread. I didn't belong in the shot. I wasn't supposed to be part of the visual. I waited until the toasts started before standing. The bride's best friend raised a glass, talking about sisterhood, about loyalty, about how Isolde would do anything for her family. I didn't scoff. I didn't roll my eyes. I just walked. Through the hallway, past the restrooms, toward the powder room I'd used earlier. I wasn't looking for anything. I just needed to stop standing still, and that's when I bumped into her. Verena. She didn't startle, just looked up from her compact mirror like I'd interrupted her in the middle of applying righteousness. "Ren," she said, not warmly, not coldly, just like my name was an inconvenience. "I wasn't served," I said. "I'm sure it's just a mix-up." "It's not," she sighed, snapping the compact closed. "I really wish you wouldn't turn this into something." I stared at her. "I'm not the one who turned it into something, Mom. I'm the one sitting next to a trash bin while the rest of the family eats lobster risotto." She looked around, as if making sure no one could hear, like embarrassment was more dangerous than injustice. Then she said the line that stopped everything. "You always make things about yourself." There it was, the soft dagger, not loud, not even mean-sounding, just tired, as if my presence was a burden she could never quite shake. I stepped back, not physically, just emotionally. I let the words land, let them stick, let them hurt, and for once, I didn't let it slide. "You know what? Maybe I should." She blinked. I turned and walked off. Back toward the ballroom. I didn't care what speech was happening. I didn't care who was crying into their Prosecco. I walked to the side, near the tall windows overlooking the city. The lights of Sacramento sparkled like promises, distant and not for me. From there, I could still hear the speeches. Isolde's friend went on about resilience and family roots. Everyone clapped at the right times. I stood alone and listened to the lie being swallowed by the masses. Because that's what families like mine do. They dress it up, light it well, and sell it with a smile. Then I took my phone out again. I tapped the screen, found the file, and stared at it. The contract, the one with my name, the one that backed the deposit on this entire event, the venue, the caterer, even the honeymoon package. Isolde had needed help 6 months ago, and I, soft, reliable Ren, had said yes. No questions, no demands. But I'd kept a copy. And while they'd all spent the night reminding me I didn't belong, they forgot one thing: the decorations don't pay the bills. I stared at the document, still unsigned, still unapproved. And then I smiled, just slightly. They had their stage. Now I had the spotlight. I stepped out through the side doors, the distant echo of another toast still lingering behind me. The hallway led toward the valet station, quiet, barely lit except for a single sconce above the exit sign. I needed the distance, not just from the noise or the speeches, but from the lies being served with champagne and lobster. There, in the shadow of the valet booth, I leaned against the stone wall, slipped my phone out again, and opened the email folder titled Wedding Documents. The file was still there, untouched. My name sat on line 12, directly beneath Isolde's, right above the venue's final balance statement. Ren Blanchard, co-funder. It had felt so harmless at the time. A favor, a sisterly act. An unspoken plea masked as casual desperation. I could still remember her voice on the phone 3 months ago. It's not a loan, okay? It's just a buffer. You know how the beauty brand rollout's eating all our cash flow. I just need someone reliable to lock it in until I can get the next installment cleared. Reliable. That word again. Not beloved, not appreciated, just dependable, like duct tape or freezer bags. I didn't ask questions back then. I just wired the money. Now I was staring at that same contract, and something inside me began to recalculate, not with rage, but with a deliberate, math-like calm. The kind you learn when you've been sidelined so many times, you stop flinching and start watching. I scrolled down, double-checked the clause regarding final payments. The balance was still pending. Without my last confirmation, the rest wouldn't go through. A shadow moved near the hallway entrance. Voices. I turned slightly and caught a glimpse of 2 older relatives, Mom's cousins, I think, chatting near the restroom corridor. I mean, she works for charities, right? One of them said, too loudly not to be intentional. Still single, still renting, and yet here she is, walking around like she matters. The other laughed, one of those dry, judgmental chuckles that have poisoned too many family gatherings. Well, it's not like she ever really fit, did she? I didn't turn around. I just let the words sink in like water through old floorboards. That's the thing about being talked about in third person when you're in the room. You don't react anymore. You just take notes. When the hallway cleared, I headed back inside, this time toward the rear corridor near the bridal prep suite. A long stretch of velvet carpet, dimmed chandeliers, and too many framed photos of other people's weddings. I found an alcove bench and sat down, and I remembered Isolde, 3 weeks earlier, sitting across from me at a cafe in Midtown, wearing her sunglasses indoors, tapping her acrylic nails against her coffee cup like each tap was a countdown. "You always say no to big stuff," she'd said, brushing aside her hair like the comment didn't sting. "Just this once, say yes. I can't have Mom knowing we're strapped. She'll cancel the whole thing." That was the trick. She knew how to ask for things that were framed as family obligations. If I said no, I wasn't just letting her down. I was letting Mom down, letting everyone down. I'd said yes. Now here I was, sitting in a corner of her dream day, holding the one thread that could unravel it all. I opened the payment portal, logged in, verified credentials. The system showed a prompt. Ready to release final installment? I hovered my thumb over the confirmation button, paused, then backed out. Not yet. Timing mattered, impact mattered, and I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it to remind them that even silence has a cost. Footsteps approached from the side hall. I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked back into the venue, not toward the dance floor, not to reclaim a chair, but just to move like I belonged, like someone who held a secret they hadn't figured out yet. I passed a group of Isolda's friends near the dessert bar. One looked me up and down, then nudged the other. The second one whispered, "That's the one she warned us about." I didn't stop walking, because this time I wasn't their prop. This time I was holding the switch. As I crossed back into the ballroom, the lights dimmed slightly. An unspoken cue that speeches were wrapping and the fun part of the evening had begun. The crowd's mood shifted, looser now, buoyed by wine and performative sentimentality. Isolde was laughing at something a guest whispered into her ear. She looked radiant, unbothered, triumphant. I watched from the edge, behind a cluster of fake orchids arranged like they were auditioning for a perfume ad. That's when the MC returned to the mic, clearing his throat and flashing a rehearsed smile. Let's take a quick moment to highlight a few incredible gifts that truly touch the bride and groom. My body tensed. He began listing names I barely recognized, each matched with a gift that would have been considered excessive in any normal family. An engraved espresso machine from a business partner, a honeymoon kit from someone who used to date the groom, a framed custom sketch of their engagement from Isolde's Pilates instructor. Then he read mine, except not really. And this lovely vintage travel trunk filled with personalized notes and handmade accessories for their trip to Santorini, gifted by Sienna Markham, Isolde's longtime mentor and partner at Vitalux Media. The crowd clapped politely. I didn't. Because it wasn't Sienna's gift, it was mine. I'd spent 3 weekends sourcing each item down to the hand-stitched initials on the leather pouches. I wrote every note myself, folded them carefully, sealed each envelope. Sienna didn't even know about it. I glanced across the room. Sienna gave a small wave, looking confused, then shrugged it off and returned to her drink. I walked toward the gift table slowly, knowing the distance wouldn't soften the blow. Halfway there, someone tapped my elbow. "Excuse me?" I turned. A woman, heels too high for comfort, designer clutch dangling from her wrist, smiled at me and extended her glass. "Would you mind? Just a splash more, if you're passing." I blinked. She tilted the glass toward me, gently but firmly, as though this was our shared understanding. She thought I worked here. I reached out, took the glass, walked a few feet toward a nearby tray of untouched glasses, and set hers down with a soft clink. Then I turned back. "I don't work here," I said. Her smile faltered. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize." But I was already walking away. I reached the gift table. It was crowded earlier, but now mostly deserted. Tissue paper poked from gift bags. Cards sat half open, ribbon ends curling like forgotten party streamers. And there it was, the trunk, my trunk. A simple white tag dangled from its handle. "To Isolde Nathan, with love and admiration, Sienna." I slipped the tag off, folded it in half, dropped it into the trash bin tucked beneath the tablecloth. From my clutch, I pulled a small, hand-lettered card I'd written that morning, just in case. I tucked it under the leather strap of the trunk. It said, "Return to sender." No flourish, no signature, just truth. A few feet away, I heard someone murmur. I turned to see Isolda's assistant, the same one who'd handed out guest badges, standing frozen mid-step, her brows knitting as she tried to decide whether to approach. She didn't have to. I walked toward her, stopped a few inches away. "Tell your boss," I said quietly, "to check the payment queue." She blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" "She'll understand." Then I turned and walked toward the back of the room, toward the shadows near the DJ booth, where no one would look for me again. The chatter had started, guests whispering, shifting in their chairs, trying to place what had just happened, trying to reconcile the image of me, the invisible sister, with this version, the one who wasn't smiling anymore. One of the servers glanced at me and gave a tiny nod. It was the first acknowledgement I'd had all night. The bridal suite was tucked behind a double door at the end of the east hallway, past the last linen cart and a stack of folded chairs waiting for teardown. The air there was cooler, quieter. A few staff members passed by, speaking in hushed tones, stealing glances they thought I wouldn't notice. I didn't rush. I wanted to time it right. The call to cut the cake would go out in 5 minutes. That was the next cue on the program. All eyes would return to Isolde, to the stage she'd built. I wanted to be close enough to hear the unraveling. I paused at the last bend of the hallway when a door clicked open near the service area. A young coordinator, the same one who had handed out guest badges earlier, stepped out, walking briskly. She nearly collided with me. "Oh, sorry." Her eyes flicked up, registered who I was, and widened slightly. "Actually, I was looking for you." I didn't answer, just waited. She looked over her shoulder, lowered her voice. "I thought you should know. Your name was on the original guest list, full access, front row seat. Then 3 days ago, we got an updated file. Your name was the only one removed." I studied her face. She wasn't lying, and she wasn't trying to flatter me. "Wednesday?" I asked, my voice calm. She nodded. "I have the email if you need it." "I don't." And I didn't. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't logistics or overcapacity or vendor error. That was intent. I thanked her, quietly, and let her walk away. Back in the ballroom, applause was rising again. I heard the MC announce the next segment, a final mention of special gifts that truly elevated the couple's experience. I'd barely returned to the room when I caught the words, "A generous honeymoon package, full accommodations, meals, private driver, and guided tours across Greece, from a dear friend of the bride." The room cheered. Isolde beamed. My name didn't appear, again, but this time it didn't hurt. It confirmed everything. I walked toward the side hallway again, where the hotel's secure Wi-Fi connection was strongest. Sat down on a low bench next to a vending machine that still had 2 cans of Diet Dr. Pepper left. I opened the event finance portal. My login worked instantly. 2 tabs. Venue, final installment, and honeymoon booking. Status, pending release. I hovered over the first, clicked Cancel Authorization. A small confirmation screen popped up. "Are you sure?" I tapped yes. Then the second tab. Same process. "Funds will not be transferred." Below it, a tiny box for comments. I typed, "Breach of agreement. Co-funder removed from guest list without consent." Attached was a PDF of the original signed contract. My name, clear as day, next to Isolde's. Then I pressed send. At that exact moment, through the ballroom doors, I heard the faintest crack in the party atmosphere. Raised voices, a pause in the music. I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked back toward the bridal suite. Not to fight, not to demand, to witness. By the time I reached the door, Isolde's assistant was already there, standing rigid, like she'd just seen someone walk across her grave. She stepped aside, not making eye contact. Inside, Isolde stood in front of a mirror, hands midair, holding a lipstick she clearly hadn't finished applying. One shoe off, the bustle of her gown loosely tied by someone clearly in a hurry. "Ren," she said, stunned. "What are you? You need to check the payment queue." Her forehead creased. "What?" I said it again, slower. "Check the queue, the venue, the honeymoon." She blinked. "What are you talking about?" "I'm saying," I replied, "that the rest of your fairy tale, it just lost its budget." Isolde's face drained. Behind her, Verena emerged from the bathroom. "What's going on?" "She pulled the funding," Isolde said flatly. "She pulled it." Verena's mouth opened, then closed. "I didn't want this to be a scene," I said. "But scenes don't always involve screaming. Sometimes they're quiet and administrative." "You're ruining her wedding," Verena said, her voice low but biting. "No," I said calmly. "She ruined mine." Neither replied. I turned to leave. At the door, I paused. "You made it clear I didn't belong, so I made sure I didn't." I left them standing there, Isolde barefoot, Verena speechless, and a silence behind me louder than applause. As I re-entered the ballroom, the ripple had already begun. A server stood frozen near the dessert table, holding a tray mid-air, eyes darting between the DJ booth and the head table. The music had stuttered, just long enough for the shift in mood to register. People weren't smiling anymore. Not really. They were watching. Isolde was in the center, her back straight, hands gesturing wide as she laughed with a group of guests. She didn't know yet. The crack in the floor hadn't reached her feet, but it was coming. I stayed near the back wall, partly in shadow, behind a tall arrangement of roses and white hydrangeas that smelled stronger now than they had earlier. A few feet away, the event manager, a man in a navy suit with a Bluetooth headset clipped just above his collar, hurried through the tables, whispering something to the assistant who had been dodging eye contact all night, and then he veered toward her. I watched the moment it hit. Isolde smiled at him at first, expecting another compliment, maybe a timing update for the cake. Then his words reached her. Her smile twitched, then flattened. Her eyes went wide. "What do you mean, bounced?" she said, loud enough for the first row to hear. Guests nearby turned, sensing disruption. The groom leaned in, asking something, and Isolde whispered furiously, waving her hands like she could erase the air itself. It didn't work. The manager held his ground. He nodded once, solemn, then stepped away. Isolde clutched her veil with one hand and took a few shaky steps toward the side of the room. She was trembling, mascara beginning to smear, and then she dropped to the floor. Actually dropped, like her knees gave out under the weight of it all. The kind of collapse you don't fake. Gasps spread like wildfire. Someone shouted for water. Another guest stood awkwardly, unsure whether to rush to her or give her space. The groom bent beside her, trying to soothe her, but she pulled away. Her sobbing began low, then grew, ugly and loud and real. I stayed where I was. She looked up, face red and raw, eyes scanning until they landed on me. "Ren," she choked out. "Please. You can't do this. Not now." I didn't move. Across the room, Verena stood motionless. Her hands were clasped in front of her. Her face was blank, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. This wasn't about her daughter collapsing. It was about optics, damage control, a show unraveling. She said nothing. Of course she didn't. I stepped forward slowly, crossing the room with deliberate calm. Every heel click echoed louder than the music now gone silent. When I reached her, I didn't bend down. I didn't offer a hand. I simply stood over her and said, "You wanted me out. You made sure I wasn't family tonight. I'm just honoring your wish." That was it. No theatrics, no monologue, just a return to sender. Isolde sobbed harder. Someone tried to film it. I saw a phone raised, but another guest gently lowered it, shaking their head. Not because they respected her, because they pitied her. And that was worse. I turned and walked toward the ballroom exit. The weight I'd carried all night didn't disappear. It shifted. It moved from my shoulders to hers, and she felt every ounce. With each step, the noise behind me faded, the whispers dulled, the sobbing quieted, and by the time I reached the door, only one sound remained, the soft, broken cry of a woman whose fairy tale just shattered in front of everyone she'd ever tried to impress. But justice doesn't always feel like healing. That thought settled into my bones sometime after sunrise, when the adrenaline faded and the stillness took over. I'd slept for a few hours, unevenly, dreamless, then gave up entirely. The apartment was quiet, save for the sound of the neighbor's dog barking across the hall. I sat at the edge of the bed, phone in hand, just staring. No texts from Isolde, no missed calls, no voicemails, only one message, from Verena. It came in around 5:38 a.m. I just wanted to keep the peace. 7 words, no greeting, no apology, no punctuation beyond that single heavy period. I reread it twice, waiting for the familiar surge, anger maybe, or hurt, but it didn't come. There was only stillness, that quiet, heavy feeling of knowing exactly who someone is and realizing they've confirmed it. She wanted peace more than truth, comfort more than fairness, and that was our difference, always. I got dressed slowly, not because I was unsure what to do, but because for the first time I didn't have to rush for anyone else. The wedding was over, the charade collapsed, and I wasn't invited to the cleanup. A cup of coffee later, I grabbed my keys and walked down to the riverfront. Sacramento's light filtered through the branches just beginning to brown. There were joggers and couples and dog walkers, life happening around me like nothing had broken the night before. I found my usual bench, worn wood, half-shaded, facing east, and sat with the coffee warming my palms. The peace was strange, not triumphant, just quiet. For years I had wondered what it would feel like to finally speak up, to stop letting people step over me while they called it love. But now that it had happened, it didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like the end of something I should have buried long ago. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a card I had tucked away, one of those wedding planning documents I'd kept not out of spite, but survival. The original guest list. My name had been on it. Wren Blanchard, full access, table 1, family seating. I ran my thumb over the printed letters. There it was. Proof. I was supposed to be there. I wasn't mistaken. I wasn't overreacting. They'd chosen to cut me out. I didn't keep it out of pain. I kept it as a reminder. I was meant to be part of that day. I'd shown up. And when they erased me, I wrote myself back in. That mattered. Across the river, the city glimmered with morning haze. A street musician started tuning his guitar nearby. Someone passed with a stroller. Life continuing. I thought about Verena. About how she probably crafted that message while sitting in her robe, sipping tea, telling herself that it was diplomacy. But she hadn't kept peace. She'd preserved fiction. And it cost her a daughter who finally knew better. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't check it. It wasn't going to be the apology I once craved. It wouldn't be a reckoning or an awakening. It would be another empty sentence, trying to close a wound without admitting it existed. I took a slow breath. Then I stood. dropped the guest list card into the nearest trash can. Not because it no longer mattered, but because I did. I may never get an apology, but I got my name back. And sometimes that's more than enough. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's clarity. When a family chooses silence over honesty, exclusion over empathy, you have every right to choose yourself. Ren didn't destroy anything. She simply stopped funding her own erasure. Have you ever been pushed to the edge by people who were supposed to protect you? Share your story in the comments. We're listening. And if you want more real, raw family stories like this, subscribe. We've got more to tell.